Joining us now with an exclusive Savage Nation report is Eric Stakelbeck.
Michael, great to be here as always. And the big story right now here in Washington, D.C. is that the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, Dennis Blair, is out the door. He had been the Director of National Intelligence throughout President Obama's tenure, and basically in that position, you're supposed to kind of streamline the whole process, get the CIA, the FBI, NSA, everyone on the same page with a common goal of defeating jihadist Islam. So now the search is on for the new Director of National Intelligence. And I have to say, Michael, I'm concerned about a few of the prospective candidates for this position, which really is just another layer of bureaucracy, I think, to our intelligence community.
I see what you mean.
My main concern is a guy by the name of John Brennan. Michael, I'll give you two examples of why I think Brennan would be a dangerous and a horrific choice for the new Director of National Intelligence. Number one, he gave an interview this week where he talked about reaching out and engaging the, quote, moderate elements of Hezbollah.
What? Are you kidding?
The moderate elements of Hezbollah. Now, this comes on the heels of the Obama administration last year and earlier this year talking about engaging the moderate elements of the Taliban. I think it's pretty obvious, Michael, to anyone who follows this with any degree of interest, that when it comes to jihadist Islamic terrorist groups, there are no moderate elements. Moderate for these groups means the cutoff age for suicide bombers is 6 years old rather than 11 years old. That's moderate. Yet the Obama administration is talking about engaging these people. If you're going to engage Hezbollah, like Brennan suggests, that means you're engaging Iran. Hezbollah is an arm of the Iranian regime, created by Iran, funded by Iran. They are essentially an arm of Iran. Now, Brennan wants to engage these moderate elements in Hezbollah. And listen to this, Michael. These are direct quotes from Brennan, who is a leading candidate to become our top intelligence official. Listen to this. Hezbollah is a very interesting organization, Brennan told a Washington conference. He said there are certainly the elements of Hezbollah that are truly a concern to us with what they're doing, and we need to find ways to diminish their influence and try to build up the more moderate elements within Hezbollah. Then he says, we won't deal with the foreign terrorist elements of Hezbollah. Now, that's a very interesting take by Brennan, his assessment of Hezbollah. My assessment of Hezbollah, Michael, and considering that this is a guy who might become our top intelligence official, he might want to listen. Hezbollah is an Iranian-created and funded group that has killed hundreds of Americans, including the 1983 Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 243 U.S. Marines. This is a group that pledges to wipe Israel off the map. This is a group that pledges to wipe the U.S. off the map, is a sworn enemy of the United States. We can't get lost.
Exactly.
We can't get lost in just believing that Hezbollah is an enemy of Israel. Hezbollah is an enemy, a sworn enemy of the United States. As I said, they've killed hundreds of Americans, American troops, and if you look at the statements from Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, who was Hezbollah's leader and Secretary General, he frequently blasts the United States, echoes the rhetoric of the Iranian regime, calling us the great Satan. So I don't see where the moderate elements are in this group. And I got to say, I talked to a lot of Israeli government and military officials. I talked to a lot of U.S. intelligence officials, and none of them has ever filled me in on any element of Hezbollah that is moderate or that can be engaged. But apparently John Brennan sees the possibility to reach out to Hezbollah. And another thing about Brennan that really bugs me in the Middle East theater and in his view of this war that we're engaged in right now with jihadist groups, recently he gave a speech. He was addressing a Muslim audience. He referred to Jerusalem as Al-Quds.
Oh, my God.
Which is what Muslims call Jerusalem, which is what Palestinians call Jerusalem. Referred to it as Al-Quds. Now, this is pure pandering. It's another slap in the face to Israel. Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people. It's been the capital of the Jewish people for thousands of years. The Palestinians have no legitimate claim to the city. Yet Brennan calls it Al-Quds. I'll tell you, Michael, the Obama administration, they call it outreach. engagement of the Muslim world. It almost seems like an infatuation. I think this administration is infatuated with the Muslim world. They're intrigued and infatuated by the Muslim world, and it's dangerous. This has gone beyond the point of being, okay, it's disturbing, what's Obama doing with this pandering to Muslims. It's getting to the point now where it's downright dangerous, and it's going to get people killed, innocent Americans killed. And this line of thinking is prevalent across the U.S. government at the local, state, federal level, this kind of politically correct, naive thinking, a complete ignorance about jihad and what our enemies believe. Just look at what's going on right now, Michael, in New York City, where a 13-story, multi-million-dollar mega mosque is being planned for ground zero.
That's crazy. Sorry, crazy.
That's right. An radical Islamist by the name of Faisal Abdul Rauf, a guy with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is really the granddaddy of all the terrorist groups. This is a guy who has talked about establishing Islamic Sharia law, who has talked about America being responsible for 9/11. Well, right now he owns the deed to the land, what used to be a Burlington coat factory, just a few hundred feet away from ground zero. He's going to build a 13-story mega mosque. This radical Islamist, at the scene of the greatest radical Islamist atrocity, terrorist atrocity that this country has ever seen. The open date, the proposed date of opening, is the 10-year anniversary of 9/11.
This is unbelievable to me.
This is the equivalent of 10 years after Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor attacks. This is the equivalent, and a lot of people have made this comparison, but it's a good one. It's the equivalent of the Japanese building a monument to Emperor Hirohito at Pearl Harbor just 10 years after the attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I call me crazy. I don't think that would ever happen in a million years. 50, 60 years ago, there was a different climate in this country. People were awake. They understood. They had pride. They weren't naive. The fact that this guy, and right now, I don't know what could be done to stop this, Michael. This guy legally purchased this property. We don't know where the funding's coming from. Who knows? Foreign governments, Saudi Arabia, we have no idea. But he apparently, Mr. Rauf, has purchased this property legally. I don't know, in a legal sense, I don't know how much can be done right now. Right now, this project, this mega mosque at ground zero, looks like it is being green-lighted. Now, let me give you an idea of the guy who is behind this mosque, Michael, and some of his past comments and his philosophy. This is a guy who says, well, I'm a moderate, and this is a sign of tolerance. First of all, the mosque is going to be called the Cordoba Mosque. For people who don't know a lot about Islamic history, the Cordoba Mosque is named after Muslim Spain. When Muslims conquered Spain, the ruling caliphate was called the Caliphate of Cordoba. When you talk about Cordoba, that's a sign of Islamic supremacism and Islamic conquest. So there's a reason this mega mosque in New York City at ground zero will be called the Cordoba Mosque.
Oh, my God.
This is a clear sign of Islamic supremacism, Islamic dominance. I mean, how more obvious can you be? How more blatant can you be than to build a mega mosque at ground zero? Where are we at as a country? 9/11 was just 9 years ago. We're living in some very interesting times, and we have some very, very short memories. Now, let me give you Mr. Rauf's take, Michael, on 9/11. This is what he told 60 Minutes just a few weeks after the 9/11 attacks. This is the moderate that will be in charge of the mega mosque on hallowed ground, ground zero. I can only imagine what the victims' families think. But he told 60 Minutes the attacks were, quote, a reaction against the U.S. government politically, where we espouse principles of democracy and human rights, yet ally ourselves with oppressive regimes in many countries. U.S. policies were an accessory to the crime that happened. In the most direct sense, Osama bin Laden was made in the USA. This is the guy who's in charge of this mosque. This is the face of this mosque, the moderate.
How could this be going on?
My definition of moderate Muslim do they recognize Israel's right to exist? It's real simple. I've interviewed Muslim leaders who said, I condemn Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda does not represent the true Islam. And that's great. It's easy to condemn Al-Qaeda. Everyone condemns Al-Qaeda. But then you ask them, well, what do you think of Hezbollah and Hamas? Well, look, we have to have a different conversation about that, I've been told. Suicide bombings, we disagree with suicide bombing by Al-Qaeda, but when Hamas and Hezbollah does it, they have no other recourse. They have to do this because the Israelis are occupying them and oppressing them. Michael, that's how you get down to the nitty-gritty of whether a Muslim is moderate. Do they recognize Israel and the Jewish people's right to exist? And that's how you boil it down. If they don't, I'm sorry, you're not a moderate.
Thanks for the report, Eric.